Wake up, everybody. Welcome into Redacted on this Thursday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. Of course, they largely ignored everything related to the Russian collusion hoax. And now there is a groundswell effort to have Hillary Clinton arrested. New bombshell revelations being dropped today from Senator Grassley's office around her direct involvement and approval in the Russian collusion hoax. We're going to show you the documents. And does this rise to the level of her being arrested and maybe serving the rest of her days behind prison walls?
I'm going to tell you, this is the biggest smoking gun we have seen. Even if you know the Russiagate collusion, it's amazing to see this in writing. I'm shocked by it, so stick around for that.
Maybe she could be cellmates with Ghislaine.
There we go. Two peas in a pod.
One of them will get out, yeah.
All right. We're also going to talk about how many people have died in the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, because that is exceedingly hard to pin down. Clearly, they're lying to us. We're going to talk to Colonel McGregor about that.
Yeah, we're also going to talk about this crazy deal that Trump just did with the EU. Many are saying, how in the world did the EU totally bend the knee to President Trump? There's like nothing beneficial to the EU in this whole tariff trade deal that President Trump just laid out. This seems like a huge middle finger to the European Union. What is going on here with this? We're going to dive deep into that and so much more. And by the way, how did Canada suddenly become really an anti-Christian country? We're going to talk about all of that and more on the show today, but we don't want to waste any more time. We want to get right to what's going on with the wars and an update here. It's time to get an assessment of the war in Ukraine and the genocide in Gaza. How many people have died? From a military perspective, what's next in Russia? Like, we talk about 30,000 foot level discussions about these wars, but militarily, like on the ground, what is next? And what's next for Israel in their Greater Israel Land Grab project, which, of course, has been rolled out since 1948. During yesterday's interview with Professor John Mearsheimer, Tucker Carlson sort of echoed our frustration here at Redacted when he asked this question about the number of dead Ukrainians and Palestinians. Watch.
It's weird that in 2025, we can measure everything from your heart rate to sunspots, that we don't know how many people were killed in Russia, Ukraine, or Palestine. We can't even get, I've never met anyone who can give me a hard number on Russian casualties, Ukrainian casualties, or dead Palestinians in Gaza. That's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Yesterday, we reported how Ukraine is now allowing grandfathers to fight in the war. Zelensky signed a law allowing citizens over 60 to join the military during wartime. Recruiting over 60-year-olds, a clear sign the Ukrainian army has been decimated. Colonel Douglas McGregor has warned us for years that the U.S. is backing the wrong wars, losing credibility by the day. Let's take a look at the scoreboard in Ukraine and Israel, where our tax dollars are being funneled right now. In Ukraine, the much-hyped counteroffensive failed. NATO is fracturing, many people calling for it to be disbanded. Now, with President Trump's 10-day deadline looming over Russia, Kiev is scraping the bottom of the barrel right now, drafting men in their 60s. Russia isn't retreating. They're advancing. So why would they blink at all with this 10-day threat from Trump? Meanwhile, in Gaza, we're watching the unthinkable become routine. Ralph Nader, remember Ralph Nader, former presidential candidate, says the death toll is approaching 500,000. And now Israel has moved to annex the so-called buffer zone, land that was once Palestinian. This isn't defense. This is conquest. So what are we really witnessing here? Two wars, both sold to the public as moral crusades, but both spiraling into something far darker. Colonel Douglas McGregor is here to help make sense of all of this. Colonel, good to see you. I just want to, I really wanted to get an assessment of where we were in both of these conflicts right now. Is there an end game here? And do you think you have a hard and fast number on Ukraine? Let's start with Ukraine first before we get to Gaza. How many Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in this? Do you have close to a hard number of that in this war?
You're muted, sir.
Oh, you're muted.
I have a visitor right now, and she's interfering with the new arrival.
So cute.
What I was going to say is that, my sources that are on the ground, largely in Poland, to a lesser extent in Ukraine and inside Russia, They tell me 1.8 million dead is a good number for the numbers of Ukrainian soldiers who've been killed. And if you look at that number, you've got to also assume that there are at least as many wounded, probably more. And most of those wounded will never return to duty. In other words, they're so severe that they're permanently invalids. They can't contribute anymore, which explains why they're now scraping the bottom of the barrel, literally, by bringing in 60-year-old, 65-year-old men. It's a catastrophe. Now, why is this the case? Because for the last, I would say, 6 months easily, the Ukrainian military, particularly its army, but the military in general, has been failing badly against the Russians. And they are in a state very similar to the German army as it disintegrated at the end of the Second World War. If you go back to 1944 and 45, most of the heavy casualties that the Germans took came in the last 6 to 9 months of the war. That's when things are falling apart, and you have large numbers of people who are trying to disengage, retire to new positions, or simply fall back to what they hope will be safety. And as that happens, you're seeing all the things that are being broadcast on your screen now fall on them by the thousands. I think last night it was 700 plus drones in Kiev. I don't know how many missiles and rocket artillery, but you're talking about a world in which there is no rest, a world in which there is no hiding, there is no peace, there's no concealment. And so 1.8 million is, I think, very accurate. Now, some people insist they're more dead than that. That may well be the case, but certainly not less.
1.8 million. I mean, I just dwell on that for a second, because what the Ukrainian numbers are, right? Like, Ukraine has told us like maybe 200,000 if we're lucky. I mean,
well, Clayton, Natalie, we've been dealing with this narrative that's just based on lies created by MI6 in London and CIA in Langley. They, of course, are joined at the hip with the Mossad. So you're talking about this large intelligence complex that has a media that's willing to cooperate. So what you hear in the mainstream media, of course, are also lies, because that media is supportive of these policies. So when you look at the Wall Street banks and their owners, the private equity gurus, the oligarchs that have billions, plus the media and Hollywood, obviously, you put those together, and now you have the intelligence apparatus, which is penetrated and full of what we used to call neocons. I don't know what you call them now, globalist maniacs. I have no idea, but they are 100% behind what's happening. And you have a Congress, and I would say on average, they all have a cocktail level of familiarity with reality. So they actually believe whatever they're reading in the mainstream media, and they believe whatever the assessments they're shown from the CIA and others. So the truth is dead. The only place you get the truth is to go to alternate media. Again, as I said before, people like you out there are actually searching for and finding the truth. But most people just repeat whatever the narrative is that comes down through the sources I just named.
Now, what about Russia's military strategy? Because they are not losing. They are not being pushed back along the battlefront. And in fact, when you look at the maps, it shows that Ukrainian troops are not even there to push back. They're centered along the border with Russia, not in the contested region. So why would Russia respond to a threat from President Trump? And do you think Russia has any qualms now about going up against old men? I want to ask you, maybe you can ring in on this as well. You've had experience in the Pentagon. What would you do with elderly men in your ranks?
I would give them a chance to surrender, and I'm sure the Russians will. The Russians have not been as bloodthirsty and barbarous as claimed. They've actually been very receptive to people on the Ukrainian side that wanted to surrender, and the Ukrainians that have surrendered have all reported that they've been treated well, they've been well fed, cared for. In most cases, I was reading a transcript of a radio transmission recently where a Ukrainian officer in command of what was left of his company, which was very small, decided to surrender to the Russians because he said there's no way the injured men that have survived with me are going to be cared for by the Ukrainians. They have no medical infrastructure. They can't evacuate anybody. So when you go forward to the front, You fight there, and that's where you die. So under those circumstances, what are you going to do? They'll surrender. I'm sure they will, and the Russians will be happy to take it because the more people that surrender, the fewer people you've got to fight. But I think it's important for us to understand that we have lied so prolifically for so long to the Russians, they don't believe anything we say anymore. And they certainly don't pay any attention to President Trump's threats. President Trump is like the weather. It depends on which way the wind is blowing, as what he's likely to say or not likely to say. And his threats, what are they? That they're going to add sanctions. And in order to add sanctions, you're threatening the rest of the world if it does business with Russia or business with China or somebody else. It's absurd. This is all going nowhere. And unfortunately, most Americans, they just turn on the television. They oh, well, he's a tough guy. That's right. Let's get those guys. They don't know what they're listening to. And they don't understand it. Because right now, I can tell you the Russians are prepared for World War III. They've said it as far as they're concerned. It's already begun. We don't understand that a lot of these sanctions that we're talking about are the equivalent of warfare. You know, when you sanction countries, when you steal $300 billion of sovereign national wealth from the Russians on the assumption that you're somehow or another morally superior and can do whatever you want, you're effectively declaring war on the Russian state and its people. And that's where we are. We don't get it. Recently, I was talking to some people inside the Beltway. They said, well, you know, if this doesn't work, you know, we'll have to use Tomahawks. What? Tomahawk missiles? What, have you lost your mind? You think the Russians are going to sit there and say, oh, well, look, that's a Tomahawk. Gosh, I guess these Americans are really upset. They're going to strike. First of all, they'll shoot them down. They're not supersonic. Well, some of them are, but they're not hypersonic. And they'll shoot them down, and then they'll respond. And if they're shot from Germany or shot from Poland or Lithuania, I would expect the Oreshniks to come in and obliterate the point from which they were launched. Is this what we want? I don't think so.
We have a comment here that says, didn't you used to be pro-Trump? We're not here to be pro any one person or administration. We're here to talk about the reality that we live in. So you very much could like President Trump and still not like how this is playing out in the battlefield. So people are confused by this lack of tribalism.
Well, Natalie, you know, when I spoke to Trump privately, and this is back in November, and then in April and November of 2020, I was a very different man. This was a man who felt strongly that we should withdraw our forces from Europe. The Europeans should ultimately be their own first responders. I think he's 100% right. I thought so then. I still think so now. He absolutely rejected the notion that Russia or China posed an existential threat to us. When I argued that the real existential threat to the United States emanates from the Caribbean basin and Mexico and the drug cartels as a result of the human trafficking and drug trafficking, he agreed. You know, that's 2020. And if you go back to when he ran for office this time around in 2024, most of what he said tracked with what he's always believed in the past. But he's gotten in there and he's done a 180-degree turn. He is clearly the hostage or captive or prisoner of the big lobbies, whether it's the Israel lobby or the war lobby or the pharmaceuticals or anything else. And I think that's where we are. And so under the circumstances, what am I supposed to do? Continue to say I love Donald Trump? Well, I like him personally, but I think he's leading us down the path to destruction now.
Yeah. You could be like these other conservative influencers who just want to do interviews with Trump administration officials so they kiss his ass or
make excuses.
Yeah, and you know who they are. You know who I'm talking about. But we're not going to do that on this show, and because we don't have to answer to anybody, and we don't have any big backers financing us that we have to answer to that. So we're going to be critical and praise him when he does something great, and criticize him when he does something like this. So I want to turn, before we get you out of here, Colonel, on to Palestine, on to the genocide in Gaza. Ralph Nader, honestly, I haven't heard Ralph's name come up in a long time, but in an interview, he just posted this about that the death toll is approaching 500,000. Because I'm trying to get real numbers here. You know, again, in Tucker's discussion with John Mearsheimer, this seems to be the big frustration. And Ralph Nader says 500,000 dead in Gaza. John Mearsheimer yesterday saying it's hard to get an accurate number because so many of them are just buried under rubble from the onslaught from the Israelis. Do you have a number assessment that you know of from your sources?
I've seen some assessments that have ranged from 70,000 up to 450,000. And I'm sure that Professor Mearsheimer is right in the sense that there are lots of dead, unfortunately, about which we know nothing. And we can't go in there without teams to verify or conduct, investigations. That's not going to happen as long as the Israeli state exists. They're going to cover up or conceal whatever the truth is. They long since abandoned telling the truth about anything. So at this point, and I have a lot of respect, by the way, for Ralph Nader. I think he's a man of real integrity, character, and courage, even if I don't agree with him. Whenever you listen to Ralph Nader, he's telling you the truth that as he knows it, and he's trying to tell it in a way that makes sense. So I'm afraid that Ralph's number of 500,000 is plausible. But my sources, obviously, in Israel have dried up completely, because unless you are 100% with them, you're against them as far as they're concerned.
Right. As he points out in this radio interview, even Israeli reporters are not allowed to see the truth. They're not allowed. There was a BBC reporter this week who was flying over Gaza and was forbidden from filming out the window of the plane. Ralph Nader says, you have this tiny enclave the size of Philadelphia, 2.3 million people, and they're hit with everything you can think of: bombs, artillery, sniper fire, denial of food, water, infectious diseases, destroying homes and apartment buildings. And yet we're supposed to believe that most of them are still alive, that 97 out of every 100 Gazans are alive. He says, what are they made of? Steel and asbestos? No, they're flesh and blood. They're families like us. They're women and children and elderly and the likes. And so we can't get an assessment, but we have to remember that they're not superhumans. They're like us. So how could we expect a population to survive this?
Well, you just brought up something that needs to be understood, and that is that as far as the Israelis are concerned, they are not us. They have nothing to do with us. In other words, these are subhumans, and they richly deserve to be exterminated. You can turn on the Knesset when it's broadcast or Israeli television, and Ben-Gvir and others of his ilk will be happy to tell you that. So will Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, we need to understand something, that the elimination of the Palestinian population from both Gaza and the West Bank is ongoing. And we are, unfortunately, accomplices in this thing, which is pretty awful. And somebody said, well, we have a lot of people in this country that don't belong here and should be expelled. I said, well, of course. But the people you're talking about rounding up, these illegal aliens, this is not their country. They weren't born here. They have no connection to it. But the people that live in Gaza and the West Bank, well, their ancestors have been there for 2,000 years. They do have a right to live there. It's a vast difference between expelling illegal aliens and trying to expel Palestinians. But this is ongoing. It's not going to stop. And it's part of the larger process. You mentioned the Greater Israel Project. That's pressing ahead in Syria. And in order to secure Israeli control of southern Syria, they plan on annexing the areas that belong to the Druze that run along the border with Iraq and all the way up to Iran. And of course, they also have an area in northern Syria, Rojava, which is considered Kurdistan. And all of this borders Turkey. In the middle of this is this jihadist Sunni, Islamist state that's emerged under this man Jelani, that President Trump greeted and warmly embraced as a fine young man, who is, as far as I can tell, just a war criminal and a mass murderer. And he's also trying to kill Alawites, Shiites, Christians, anybody else who is not a Sunni Islamist that bends the knee to him. So we have a catastrophe in Syria, all for the purpose of expanding Israel and encircling Iran. And this particular corridor that runs from Israel and its border all the way up on the far eastern and northern side of Syria reaches to Azerbaijan, which has now become a platform for attack against Iran. It certainly was during the missile strikes. It continues to be that, and it's being used also to split Iran from Russia. So now we're talking about 40,000, 50,000 Russian troops on the border with Azerbaijan. we seem to think that somehow or another Russia is doing so poorly in Ukraine that it can't cope with Azerbaijan. I think we're about to get an education. That's not true. As you point out, that war is coming to a close. The difference is that in Ukraine, the Russians are moving like a giant vacuum cleaner. They're simply picking up every remaining Ukrainian soldier, and anyone that doesn't surrender is killed, because they want to be sure when they move on Kiev, and they will, and south to Odessa, that there's nothing behind them that can interrupt or disrupt their operations for taking them further west. So we have two things happening right now. They're anti-Russian in the Middle East, as well as in Ukraine. And all of this is bound up with the Greater Israel Project. And by the way, the Mossad is equally engaged along with the MI6 and the CIA in Ukraine, and has been almost from the beginning.
For goodness sakes.
Real quick, we had a comment here from one of our viewers that asks this question: is it true that drug cartels are being trained in Ukraine on how to use drones? Like, are they like literally turning to the drug cartels now to be carrying out these operations?
Well, I don't know that they've turned to the drug cartels as much as the drug cartels have asked to come in there. And remember that Ukraine is an organized crime state, much like Mexico. Right. Everything revolves around money, human trafficking, drug trafficking. That's another reason the Russians want to shut this down. It's another reason why we should be interested in shutting the war down. I don't know how many women and children are missing from Ukraine. I don't even want to begin to guess, but I'm sure it's substantial. And then the drugs that pass through there, and we know the black market for all of the equipment that we send over there reaches all the way down into Kosovo and all the way to North Africa and back to Mexico. So, yeah, the drug cartels are in there, and they're trying to train their people how to use these first-person view hand-launched UAVs, or drones, as we call them. No doubt about it. Criminality, terrorism, corruption, all of those things go together. And Ukraine is the perfect example of it.
Yeah.
That's why we need what the Senate Appropriations Committee just approved, which is an $853 billion defense bill, because we know a lot of that is shifty money, gets stolen, gets in the wrong hands. It includes $800 million for Ukraine, even though the Pentagon didn't ask for it. The Senate just said, you're taking it. We love war. That's what we do. So, Colonel McGregor, thank you for letting us know what really happens.
Sobering as always.
Well,
thank you, Colonel.
Natalie, just keep in mind, some of that money's never going to go to Ukraine. It's just going to be washed through the system into the Defense Department and back to the defense industries and show up as contributions to congressmen and senators. There's a reason everybody on the Hill these days, just about everybody's a multimillionaire. That's something I would pay attention to.
Well, that's why we have to work hard to be taxed to afford it. So
yeah, so we can.
But you just got to get ladies to stop talking about beef jerky. Come on now, we got to get on other topics.
Exactly.
The Colonel logged in, and we were having a discussion about beef jerky. I could talk a blue streak about it.
In our pre-show, we were talking about like low carb good snacks. Yeah, that was our pre-show.
Also, I'm a big fan of pork rinds.
Yeah, Colonel, great to see you. Now you're making me hungry. Thanks, Colonel.
Bye-bye.
All right. Coming up on the show, we're going to talk about the EU. Why did they bend the knee to President Trump? They're literally getting, seems like, shafted in this new deal. But why did Brussels bend the knee? We're going to talk with Ralph Schulhammer about that in moments. And we're also going to talk about Hillary Clinton and should she be arrested. New revelations, bombshell revelations about that coming up. We're going to go in detail about all of this new. This may be the largest smoking gun to date. Now, we've got the receipts we're going to show you on Hillary Clinton in just moments. But first, I just found something wild about stem cells. Stem cells are like tiny repair crews in your body, and they go to fix things that need to be fixed. This is Ronnie Coleman, 8-time Mr. Olympia, a man who squatted 800 pounds like it was nothing, sharing how stem cells helped him when nothing else could. Show this. Watch this.
When you went on Rogan, he wanted to refer you to stem cells.
For the last 2 years, I've been getting stem cells, and it's been the best thing that has ever happened to me in my life.
Really?
Yeah, but you got to go out of this country to do it because they don't ever really allow the real stem cells that comes from the placenta,
Yeah.
they don't allow that here in the United States because politics.
What exactly is stem cells?
So my understanding is that they're like blank cells that can transform to anything you surround themselves with. They'll turn into that. So if you inject them in your leg, they'll turn into leg cells.
It wipes out the pain I go through because I have a herniated disc in my upper back still. As soon as I get the stem cell injection, it completely goes away.
And how much is it?
$2,800
Per
injection.
Where do you go?
Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Well, the thing about stem cells is they are expensive. You have to go to Mexico to get these. You don't want to go there to get them. Stem cell treatments have the potential to regenerate joints, repair spinal injuries, even reverse organ damage. But in the U.S., most of these therapies are restricted, not because they're unsafe, but because they threaten the big profits of big pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, hospital systems, all of that. If people could naturally get this without surgery or prescriptions, those industries would lose billions. So here's Harvard's Dr. William Lee talking about using similar supplements that Black Forest Supplements have developed with their alternative, with their cocoa flavanols. So listen to this, and this is how they're going to get the same benefits without having to go to Mexico. Watch this.
If you take the really dark chocolate, like 73% cacao, the really dark chocolate, and you make it into a high flavanol hot chocolate drink, and you have it twice a day. This was a clinical study. They found in people who wound up actually drinking the hot chocolate twice a day over the course of a month, they doubled the number of stem cells compared to the people who didn't drink hot chocolate, right? So when you and I were growing up, right, in grade school, we learned from our teachers that starfish can regenerate, salamanders can regenerate, but people can't regenerate.
Yeah,
right?
can't grow a new arm.
It's true, you can't grow a new arm, but we do regenerate. We regenerate every day. We know that we regenerate because our hair falls out and grows back. Our gut lining grows back. Our livers can grow back. If you actually remove part of your liver, it'll grow back. Our skin grows back. Our bodies possess the ability to regenerate through stem cells.
So this isn't your average cocoa. It's a stem cell power up. Mix it in coffee, protein shakes. It tastes fantastic, and the benefits are real. No sugar, only 20 calories. If you're experiencing significant aging, slow recovery, weak immunity, or just feeling off, blame your lazy stem cells. But guess what? Cocoa flavanols activate them like a fountain of youth in a scoop. So go to our description or our pinned comment, blackforestsupplements.com/redacted. Try it out. Get 40% off for the next 48 hours. Scan the QR code there on your screen. blackforestsupplements.com/redacted.
Well, Europe secured itself a truly crapola. I wanted to say that, didn't come out.
Crapolka?
It's crappy. Crapola. Crappiest.
Okay.
It's a terrible economic deal with President Trump. Ralph Scholhammer is in Austria, which is already an expensive place. And we would like to congratulate him because his life is going to be more expensive. But first, let me catch you up on why. European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen announced this economic deal with President Trump over the weekend. Here is a bit of a summary that Europe will invest $600 billion in the U.S., spend $750 billion on American energy because they don't have their own, and commit to purchasing U.S.-made military equipment and AI. But didn't von der Leyen just push through a $2 trillion euro budget, which promised to invest in European-made military technology? So they're doubling down in Europe on weapons purchases. And how are they going to pay for this? Well, obviously, the budget shows they're going to tax their citizens heavily, even though most EU countries are already above the Maastricht Treaty 60% debt to GDP limit. They're just going to take on more. They're just following in American footsteps. Charge it up, folks. Ralph, thank you for joining us. Let me know, how do Europeans feel about this? Do they understand just how expensive this will be for the European worker?
Listen, coming on after Ronnie Coleman, something to cross off my bucket list, and I just had a piece of chocolate cake, so my stem cells are also doing well. So, I'm splendid. But on a more serious note, well, there are two things that are important. One is that, yes, I think this was a clear sign that the United States have the upper hand. So that's one. Number two, we don't really have a written document here, right? All of this was agreed, but it's at best verbally. And some things like the $750 billion in U.S. energy, the United States don't at the moment produce energy of that value, and the European Union, they would basically have to give up everybody else whom they're buying from and then some to come to that number. So these numbers, I think, are more symbolic, if you want, than
right.
Then gonna have a real effect. However, and I think that's important, this is a clear signal by the United States to tell the Europeans, we've never said it, but now it's obvious you guys are weak and we take advantage of that weakness. And to be quite honest, I think this is potentially a good sign. If Europe wants to get serious, if Europe wants to be a player of the game and not just a piece on the board, this was a warning by the United States. We will see whether or not we're going to take it seriously.
Some people have called this the Suez moment for Europe, a clear sign of like imperial decline for the European Union, handing over the Suez Canal. This is exactly what Europe has done. Do you buy that argument that this is like a major capitulation now for Europe?
Politically, yes. Right? Politically, I think that is correct. On the other hand, and you guys know this better than I because you lived in the United States and you lived in Europe, it's a little bit odd when I read these articles that say that Europe is now a vassal or has been enslaved, as some commentators say, by the United States. The average European has 5 weeks of paid vacation, gets 14, not 12, gets 14 monthly salaries. We work fewer hours. We have more paid sick days. So if we are the vassals and the slaves, and you are like the masters who make it, comfortable in their hammocks, this picture, I think, is a little bit an exaggeration. The reason why Europeans are economically weak, the reason why we are not a geopolitical power is because we didn't do anything. And Natalie pointed this out. If Europeans want to arm up, whether or not that's a good idea is a separate question, we no longer have the industry. So the only place where we can buy weapons would be either China or the US. And what Trump accomplished is he made absolutely clear, if you guys gonna buy a gun, you're gonna buy a gun that is made in the United States. So from the American perspective, I think this was a victory. This was America first in action. Well done to President Trump.
Now, you're right in that all we have is this press statement from Ursula von der Leyen on the agreement. We don't have it in writing. We do have, though, the 2 trillion euro spending plan that was outlined on the EU's website. It's called Europe's Budget, and it has all kinds of nonsense, which makes me really concerned for European life. Because now they're going to tax they call it own resources, right? Which means we're going to put taxes on the resources that Europeans already have. That means you as a European own it. We're going to take it. All kinds of fees, carbon emissions on tobacco. Uncollected e-waste was one that really put my spidey sense up, because if they don't know that you've recycled your iPhone, they're going to charge your country, and your country will tack that on to your prices. So they're already doing crazy things. And so there's no reason to think that they won't do the same crazy things with this.
No, they can't let go. I mean, we had this conversation, I think the first time I came on Redacted was now almost 3 years ago. They just can't let it go. There is, in the document you're talking about, Natalie, there is this idea they want the tax for every company that has a turnover of more than 100 million per year, but not profit, turnover. So you can imagine if you run a company, this is insanity. Like you can. If you want to tax somebody, tax their profit. That's also mad. But to tax somebody's turnover is completely insane, because they don't have the money. So they have to find all kinds of new creative ways to sluice it away from the little or the least things that remain that are still productive in Europe. And I don't know if you or your viewers have seen this, but the German auto industry is collapsing in front of our eyes. All the major car companies, Mercedes, BMW, Audi, VW, they all had horrible numbers that came out over the last couple of weeks. So it's really, really bad, and it's only going to get worse.
What's this going to mean for countries like Germany? I mean, who rely on these massive exports to the United States, these sort of luxury brands. We've already seen, you and I have cataloged this on the show over the years, all these German businesses closing down as a result of their own energy policies and other failed. Now it's like this. Is this going to be like the nail in the coffin for a lot of these businesses?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the car industry in Europe is still a main pillar of the overall industry and the overall wealth and living standards in Europe. So if they go under, this is going to be horrible for the rest of the continent. Listen, I don't enjoy being a doomsday sayer, but you just hit the nail on the head, Clay. The Europeans had a very specific economic model, and this was a kind of neo-mercantilist model. We wanted to be the champions of exporting stuff. The United States for a long time were the champions of importing and consuming stuff. And Donald Trump, justifiably so, said, listen, guys, we need to find some balance in the future because, and he's right about this, if you guys celebrate being exporters, that means that being an importer apparently is not that great. Or if you say that running a positive trade balance is awesome, then having a negative trade balance apparently is not so awesome. And he wants to, counteract this a little bit, which is absolutely fine. But the Europeans are not prepared for that. The Chinese, by the way, on the other hand, and this is why the negotiations with the Chinese now have again been pushed back. The tariffs have again been pushed back by 90 days. Is the Chinese have been playing their cards much better because they export stuff to the United States actually need. The Europeans export stuff to the United States very often that are not, required for American industry. Those who are, by the way, are exempt from the 15% tariff. But other things like Gucci bags and Italian cheeses and French wine, there you're going to have the tariffs because America doesn't need that to survive. But European industry and European companies need to export it to survive.
Right. Well, Ralph, thank you so much for bringing in on this. I mean, I just don't see, I feel really badly for the Europeans who are there, who life is just going to get more and more expensive, more and more restrictive. And what are you going to get from it? I mean, the language is very much, we love innovation, we love our companies, but the actions are just the opposite. So I feel sad for, the cost of living for working class people.
The issue is, this is the problem. We were a little bit spoiled by the 90s and early 2000s when everything seemed to run on autopilot. And if everything runs on autopilot, it doesn't matter if you have incompetent politicians. Now that the world is in a new great power competition on whosever side you are, but now you actually need competent people to play the game. And Ursula von der Leyen, unfortunately, is a good example. We don't have competent politicians at the moment. And this is why you then end up with deals like this, because the Europeans could have anticipated Trump returning to power. Trump made absolutely clear during his campaign, starting in 2023, what he's going to do. Like, none of this should be a surprise for anybody who listened to his campaign. But the Europeans, they put their fingers in their ear, believe that Kamala Harris or that Joe Biden is going to win. And now they have to live with the consequences of their decisions.
Ralph Schulhammer, host of the Hammer Time podcast. Check it out. Always great to have Ralph here. Ralph, what time is it there in Austria right now?
It's 10:30.
10:30 at night. So thank you for staying up with us late. As always,
Anytime.
Ralph, great to see you.
Anytime.
Appreciate it, Ralph.
See you guys.
Have a great
Bye.
night, my friend. Thanks so much. Okay. All right, coming up.
We also have Mike Krupa, who's in the same time zone. So we'll get to him so he can hit his bedtime on time.
Well, we're going to talk to Mike in a second here, Dr. Krupa out of Poland, to talk about these protests that have erupted in Poland over Ukrainian refugees and the violence there. There was actually an attempt to bomb a tenement house in Warsaw. A Ukrainian national was attempting to do that. What is separating Poland from the rest of Europe right now, both on their currency, economic numbers, everything else? So we're going to talk about that in a second. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Shopify, because if you've ever been shopping and you notice that purple Shop Pay button and how easy it is to buy something online on your phone or on your computer, well, maybe you didn't realize, but that Shop Pay button means that store is powered by Shopify, like the Redacted store that you're looking at right now. And in fact, that makes it so that you can sell anything online. You can do any kind of e-commerce, and Shopify handles everything for you. And that's why we're so happy to run the Redacted store on Shopify, because it's easy, it's simple. We don't have to do back end. We don't have to do any kind of reporting. They take care of it for you. So if you're thinking of launching your business to the world, but you're thinking, oh, I don't know how to take payments, I don't know how to run back end or e-commerce, well, you don't have to. If you launch on Shopify, Shopify has everything you need to grow your business, from your first sale to your $1 million sale. You're going to do it. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., from household names like Mattel to brand names just getting started. Again, we're not just getting started, but the Redacted store, which is probably in between startup and Mattel, I would say. Shopify gives you that leg up from day one. So check them out. You can sign up for a 1-month trial period today if you go to shopify.com/redacted. One more time, if you want to see less carts being abandoned, it's time to head on over to Shopify, shopify.com/redacted. One more time, that's shopify.com/redacted.
Well, Poland is reaching a breaking point. Across the country, massive protests erupted as Polish citizens demand an end to the unchecked flood of Ukrainian refugees. What started as temporary wartime hospitality has turned into a long-term crisis now in that country, and many Poles say they've had enough. Just in the past week, a Ukrainian national was caught trying to bomb a tenement house in Warsaw. So why is Poland being forced to bear the brunt of Ukraine's war fallout, and how close is this refugee crisis to boiling over? Joining us now from Warsaw, Poland, is Dr. Mike Krupa, political scientist, columnist, expert on Polish national policy. He's been sounding the alarm long before the mainstream media caught on. Dr. Krupa, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
Great to see you guys again. Good evening from Polska.
From Polska, from Warsaw. Late night there. Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to talk about these protests. First, what are we seeing? What are they exactly protesting across Poland against Ukraine or Ukrainian refugees?
So the majority of the protests that you showed in that clip there against the refugees basically arose out of a frustration because what we were seeing at the German-Polish border was in essence the German police trying to literally deport across the open border because we are in the Schengen zone directly into Poland. There are several bridges across the Polish-German border in the west, and literally trying to force Poland to accept people who got into Germany from places such as Somalia, Afghanistan, North Central Africa, Syria, basically majority Islamic countries from the Maghreb and the Middle East that got into Germany but were deemed unwanted, and therefore they were sort of forced onto the Polish population literally by the Germans. So the local populace started taking notice that, these guys are just walking across the river. They don't look German by any chance, and they just walk straight into Poland. So there was a grassroots organization. It is called Ruch Obrony Granic, basically the movement to defend borders, which started bringing in citizens to basically enhance the security at these former border checkpoints between Poland and Germany to not take in these so-called refugees or engineers, as they call them in Poland. And this transpired into a political crisis in the current coalition because the border guard, the police were deemed ineffective in doing their job. We heard also from the police itself and from the border guard that their hands were tied, that they couldn't do anything, that these were political decisions. But once the news came out that a lot of these Afghans or Germans or Somalis were crossing literally into Poland and being driven by the German police to the former border checkpoints, that's when the Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, actually said that he had a discussion with Chancellor Merz, and he apparently, made it clear to the German leader that this is unacceptable, that Poland won't be taking in these refugees, but the milk already spilled, so to say. So this then transpired into massive protests all across Poland, which addressed mostly the illegal immigration that we saw happening coming in from Germany, because this was, in fact, an illegal act. But there were also, at least I saw in several of these demonstrations, the issue, in my opinion, the larger issue of mass legal migration to Poland, which is something very critical, and I think at this juncture much more critical to our future, to our internal labor market, internal security, and a host of other issues that were also brought up. So what you see is basically a confluence of two issues coming together: the illegal immigration issue that was being exported to us mainly from Germany, and the migration crisis that we are experiencing in Poland due to mass legal migration, that we are bringing in more and more people from places, especially first and foremost Ukraine, but also Bangladesh, Nepal, and recently even South America.
Well, what are some of the ways that this has affected life for Polish people? Is it unemployment? Is it increase in taxes? Is it rising rates of crime? Can you lay that out for us? Exactly what they're protesting in terms of how it affects their families.
Well, sure. I think the most important issue that solidified the protests all across Poland that we saw over a week ago was the issue of security. from the perspective of Western Europe, we've obviously, seen the jihadi-inspired terrorist attacks. We don't want that in Poland. But we're also seeing that people who have nothing to do with jihadist ideology that come to Poland from, for example, the Caucasus or former Soviet republics such as Ukraine are bringing their own unfortunate criminal habits also into Poland. And these are not necessarily illegal immigrants, but legal migrants. And if you look at the Polish statistics recently, you'll notice that the majority of criminals in the foreign-based statistics in Poland are Ukrainians. We have basically a phenomenon that we haven't seen since the crazy early 1990s in Poland of Georgian gangs stealing cars, beating up people, harassing people. And Georgians tend to be very aggressive when they're organized into gangs, something that Ukrainians haven't caught up onto in Poland, fortunately, yet. But unfortunately, the Georgian menace is pretty dangerous. It's pretty aggressive. The police in Poland are unfortunately understaffed, but there is a realization that we have a huge problem that not only stems from what's coming from Western Europe, but as of today, I would even say mostly from what we have opened up our borders to coming from the East. So as I said, the Caucasus, Georgia especially, but also Ukraine. So internal security, the safety of families and basically people on the streets, I think would be the fundamental issue that was brought up during these protests, and that's why they were so radical in their messaging. But there is also obviously another host of issues, such as the influence on the labor market and wage suppression of Polish workers that would demand a serious rethink of the current migration policy, such as introducing what I'm advocating for, at least in the last couple of months and years, a 5-year immigration moratorium to Poland.
That'd be amazing. Well, maybe Poland be out in front on this. I want to get your take on this. Zero Hedge published this piece by the Market Ear the other day. And it really talks about how Poland is winning. Postcard from Warsaw, bullish Poland, a city that feels like a breath of fresh air, Warsaw specifically, all in Europe. Clean, safe, beautiful people, untouched by the urban decay and social tensions plaguing cities like Paris or London. Dare I say that Poland's refusal to bend on migration has kept its capital orderly and confident. And it goes through and kind of talks about how Warsaw is winning. Polish stocks have more than doubled since 2022. The zloty, the currency, is strengthened versus the US dollar. Donald Tusk saying we're not going to accept a single migrant. Saying that in early 2024 with a strict no-tolerance policy towards illegal immigration. Buying gold. Poland continues to buy as much gold as they can. And Poles also know that in order to succeed, you have to work hard. So all of this sounds great. Do you take umbrage with any of this?
Well, I think if you were to stay in Poland a little bit longer, I think you would see some of the negative tendencies that we Poles living in Poland on a day-to-day basis see. Obviously, if you're in Warsaw, things might look a little different because Warsaw is the capital. Warsaw is shiny. Warsaw is nice. However, if you travel across Poland, you would see that we're not a monolithic country in this regard. And we do have many, many problems that are alien to the typical latte-sipping liberal in the capital of Poland. Obviously, I think if you come as a tourist to Warsaw, obviously, you will notice that it's not London. It's not Stockholm. It's not New York. There's no rats doing, running around in the subway system. Yeah. Exactly. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle vibes there. But yeah, if you stay longer, however, you do get accustomed to the problems that we're facing here in Poland. And many of them stem from mass legal migration. I keep repeating this because, you mentioned Tusk saying we're not going to accept one migrant. Yeah, okay, but he was referring to illegal immigration, which in Poland right now is a very easy issue to sell because nobody likes illegal migrants. Everybody understands that the ones coming are usually coming from Islamic countries. You think Islam, you think terrorism, you think bombs, and so on. But the bigger problem is mass legal immigration, because in terms of culture, I'll give you an example. Just in the last couple of days, the Polish Ministry of Education has decreed that in grades 7 to 8, Ukrainian will be now taught as a second language. So this is the direction that we're going. And I think that will have
option or mandatory.
From what I understand as an option, the current options right now were German and English for obvious reasons, but bringing in Ukrainian basically signifies that you're building a sort of parallel society, because, I mean, we don't have a mass of Germans in Poland or a mass of Americans. You learn the language because you want to understand the world. But why would you want to learn Ukrainian, for example? So those language courses are obviously offered to Ukrainian pupils, Ukrainian students. A lot of people got ticked off at this because nobody, even people from the left and the liberals, who live in nice, gated communities and send their kids to fairly good public schools, but they notice, for example, that there are enough spaces in those public schools for Polish peoples because there's so many Ukrainians. And now we're giving them the option of studying their own language. Well, hello, what about assimilation? I thought we were a melting pot. Are we building a multicultural society? Those are issues that haven't been brought up in the context of, as I said again, legal immigration. And I think things like this are going to have a much more significant impact on the future of a cohesive Polish society than the few Afghans and Somalis that are trying to cross the border from Germany, which obviously has to be stopped. But in terms of the mass and the scale of legal migration to Poland, we have to have a moratorium in the near future.
Poland would be a shining beacon on a hill if they did that. Mike Krupa, Dr. Mike Krupa, great to see you from Warsaw, as always. Thank you for staying up late with us there. We appreciate it. Great to see you again.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Hope to see you soon.
You bet. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. All right, coming up on the show, we're going to talk about Canada. How did Canada become an anti-Christian country? Popular Christian singer, worshiper, just there, came back to America, kissed the ground when he returned, saying he couldn't believe how anti-Christian that country has become. Also, the Freedom Convoy truckers in that country, they've been awaiting their sentencing now that they've been found guilty of mischief. And guess what? Could they be facing 8 years behind bars thanks to the liberal Mark Carney government that wants to shame those who stood up to the tyranny of the Trudeau government? We're going to talk about that in Canada in moments. But first, well, you guys know I've been railing against these huge tech companies that want to own everything about us. They don't just want our money. They want to know everything about you. These sort of shadowy data brokers making a living, compiling detailed profiles of your online activity, everything that you are doing, and they're selling them to marketers and other corporate interests. And it seems like the U.S. government is in lockstep with these companies. But there is a way to keep your browsing history truly private so that they cannot snoop on you. And I use it every day. I've got it on my laptop sitting right here in front of me. I have it on my Mac in my office. I have it on my iPhone. It's an app called ExpressVPN. One of the easiest ways for data brokers to track you is through your device's unique IP address, which also reveals information about your location. When you have ExpressVPN turned on, your IP address is hidden. That makes it much more difficult for data brokers to monitor, track, and monetize your private online activity. Now, I use it all the time, every day. We wouldn't be able to do our show because there are so many news websites that are blocked in certain countries because they don't want you to know the truth. Well, guess what? I jump on using ExpressVPN. I'm able to jump into a different country, use a different IP address, and able to get access to that information. So just one tap to turn it on and you are protected. It's that easy. So guys, right now, find out how you can get 4 months free by scanning the QR code right on your screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or simply by going to expressvpn.com/redacted. Get 4 months free just by scanning that QR code right on your screen, or clicking the link in the description box below, or simply going to expressvpn.com/redacted. All right. Well, thank you guys, by the way. I just want to say thank you guys for subscribing to our show. If you're not already a subscriber, please do. It's free, totally free. We're able to cover these stories, again, free to you. We're alternative media. We're not funded by Big Pharma. We're not funded by Israel. We're not funded by APEC. We're not funded by anybody. We are supported by you and the few sponsors that we have here on the show. So thank you guys so much for your support. Again, if you're watching us on Rumble, thank you for subscribing or following us there. Whatever they call it. I think on YouTube they call it follow now. They don't call it subscribe. I don't know. Anyway, follow us.
Still subscribe on YouTube and follow on Rumble.
Follow on Rumble, subscribe on YouTube. On X, I think it's follow. So anyway, it's all free.
Yes.
It's all free. So thank you guys. Anyway, let's talk about Canada now. Is Canada now an anti-Christian country? Journalist David Creighton covered the recent trip of American pastor and Christian musician to Canada. Here is his piece that he wrote for the Blaze Media. And when that singer, Sean, returned home this weekend after the start of a short Canadian tour, he did something he'd never done before. He fell to the ground and then he kissed American soil because he was shocked at the hostility towards Christianity in Canada. When did this happen? Maybe it's happened. I've been blinded to it. I didn't know. Ottawa journalist, independent journalist, David Creighton joins us now to talk about that and more. We're going to talk also about the Freedom Convoy here in a second. But David, this is a part of the story I hadn't heard. You know, we were seeing obviously the persecution of Christians around the world, covering the bombing in Gaza of a Catholic church. This is happening all over the world, but Canada, when did this start happening?
I'm not quite sure when it started happening, but we saw this demonstrated in a very sinister way last week when Sean Foyt, who is a Christian musician and pastor, came to Canada. And immediately he was assaulted by the mainstream media as being MAGA affiliated, quote unquote, as being a friend of Donald Trump, quote unquote, as being extremist, as being divisive. And why? Because he's an evangelical Christian. And he came to Canada not to talk about politics. He came to Canada to preach, to sing, and to worship Jesus Christ as Lord. And that's exactly what happened wherever he went in Canada. Problem was, Clayton, everywhere he tried to go from Moncton to Toronto, the mayors of those cities actively intervened to have his event canceled. So he was forced to seek the assistance of local churches. And that's precisely what happened. Local churches hosted him. So he was able to follow through in a 6-city date, but in every Canadian city, from Moncton to Toronto, the local governments, the local mayors tried to intervene to stop the event from happening. And he's coming back in August, and he's already been told by Winnipeg that he's not welcome at that city's Central Park. However, folk, the great premier of Alberta, a good friend, Danielle Smith, has already said, Sean, you're welcome to come to Edmonton and sing on the stairs of the legislature, of the provincial legislature, because in Alberta, we're not anti-Christian. But apparently in much of Canada, anti-Christian sentiment reigns supreme. Christians are now third-class citizens in much of Canada. And this is a land that was founded by Christians, evangelicals, mainstream Protestants, Roman Catholics. That's who founded this country. And we're now being told, you're not welcome in the public sphere anymore. You can't talk in the public space because you're too divisive. And why is he so divisive? Well, apparently he's pro-life, as I am. He's against critical race theory, as I am. He is opposed to the LGBTQ agenda, as I am. So I don't think that makes him extremist in any extent. It just makes him an evangelical Christian who's principled enough to believe in the Bible. And that's what he's all about. And if you watched the concerts he staged across central and eastern Canada, there were no politics. He wasn't talking about voting for Donald Trump. He wasn't talking about how great the MAGA crowd is. He preached the gospel. And if you watch these concerts, they were just like anything you might see at a Pentecostal church throughout Canada or throughout the United States on a Sunday morning. There was no difference. And this entire episode, Clayton, has disgusted so many Christians to say, you know, we became conditioned to this kind of behavior from local governments during the COVID pandemic. We became used to the police invading our churches, arresting our pastors, clearing out the people from the church, saying, you can't worship here, it's not safe. Why don't you go to a bar or a strip club? It's safer there. You can do that, but don't go to church on Sunday. And we became conditioned to this. And I tell you, the height of absurdity here, Clayton, is when he tried to perform in Montreal, and the woke Mayor Plante of that, Valerie Plante of Montreal, said, you're not performing in this city, you're far too divisive. A Spanish Catholic church offered him a place to play. And the police invaded that church. They prevented people from coming in. They blockaded the front door until Antifa arrived. And then they decided to perhaps go outside and see if Antifa was causing more trouble. Antifa literally threw a smoke bomb in the middle of the concert at Sean Foyt. The police did absolutely nothing to protect him. And they said at the end of the evening, hey, you might have had your concert, but the city's going to fine you people for this. And sure enough, Clayton, the city of Montreal fined that Spanish Catholic church $2,500 for hosting a Christian pastor. Since when, I ask you, do you need a permit? Does a church need a permit to host a pastor or a musician in their church? This is a complete outrage, and this is why I'm saying Canada has become demonic, not just anti-Christian. This is incredibly evil, what happened here last week.
Well, he called it, in fact, Sean, when he returned, he said he saw Canada as being run as a demonic stronghold. That Canada is now a demonic stronghold. I mean, those are his words, not mine. And you're right. I mean, it's unbelievable to see even like the CBN like reporting about that $2,500 been hit with that $2,500 fine just for hosting the church service. It's unbelievable. And what are they saying? What was their reasoning for issuing the fine? Like, it's in his views on sexuality, abortion, government overreach. That's a problem for the Montreal government. So he's not allowed to have to perform in a church. We're like, what was their reasoning for the fine and shutting it down?
They had no reason. They had absolutely no reason. This is a product of COVID reasoning, which is, we don't have to give you a reason for coming into your church and throwing people out. During COVID, it was for health reasons. During this instance, it was for security reasons. Oh, we're worried that his presence in the city is going to cause some sort of very divisive, controversial reaction. And my response to that was, well, why don't we start banning Liberal Party conventions? Because they're just as divisive and controversial wherever they have a convention. So when did it become illegal to be controversial or divisive? That's really the nature. That's the foundation of democracy, is division, that people don't have to agree on a one-party state solution. People don't have to agree on everything the government tells them. So there's the nature of a democracy is inherently, to some degree, divisive. Yeah. We're not always going to agree on things, but we're supposed to have something called freedom of religion. And I'm sorry, that's evanescent in Canada today.
No, you would think we would have this. Certainly we understand this on the big tech platforms. Like YouTube suppresses our show. YouTube suppresses Tucker's show. YouTube suppresses so many shows that are, that
my show
have your show that run counter. Thank God we have Rumble, because most of our audience is now moved over to Rumble. So like we're streaming live right now. We expect that sort of on the big tech platforms. But when you have a constitution, you have a law of the land, for the government to come in there and just shut down freedom of expression, free speech in a church. I mean, this is authoritarian level. I mean, that's what this is to me. This is fascism. That's authoritarian level. You love to throw around the term Nazis. I mean, that's exactly what this is. And the Carney government is allowing and facilitating this. Another piece of this, you mentioned COVID, is the Freedom Convoy sentencing. So you just penned this piece at the Blaze Media, Freedom Convoy sentencing straight from the anarcho-tyranny playbook. And you basically say that Chris Barber and Tamar Lish, two of the main organizers of the 2022 Freedom Convoy, could be locked up for years now. They were found guilty on mischief, which I don't think anyone could even describe what that even was. Mischief. But now they've been awaiting sentencing. I mean, it seems like forever at this point. And they're not up until October, but now like word on the street is they could face up to 8 years behind bars. This is outrageous. What do you know?
Well, that's what the Crown Council, and for your American viewers, the Crown refers to the prosecution, which is, of course, in this case, the Ontario government. It's not actually the federal. A lot of people think this is Justin Trudeau started this whole thing. He invoked the Emergencies Act, but it was Premier Doug Ford, the faux conservative, the red Tory Premier of Ontario, who has been pushing this prosecution. I was there at this trial from day one, and that was early September 2 years ago when this trial started. By the time they get their sentencing on October 7th, it's going to be literally 25 months of lawfare. And of course, we had last week, I went to the trial because I was expecting they were going to have the sentencing last week. I was informed upon arrival that no, this was a sentencing hearing. It was going to be 2 more days of legal padding to put Tamara Leach and Chris Barber through a little more lawfare, a little more hell. And that's what this is all about. But the prosecution revealed at this point their documents stating explicitly they think these people are guilty of extraordinarily criminal, get this, extraordinarily criminal behavior, and that Chris Barber deserves 8 years in jail. Tamara Leach, 7 years in jail. And this is the part that really smacks of Bolshevism. The Crown wants to expropriate Chris Barber's truck, from which he gains his livelihood. But it also happens to be an icon of the Freedom Convoy, and it was nicknamed Big Red. It became symbolic of the whole convoy experience. And this is how vindictive the woke prosecution is. They want to take his truck away and put him in jail for 8 years. And it's absolutely astounding because I tell you, on the same week that the Crown announced that Chris Barber should go to jail for 8 years for organizing a peaceful protest, for cooperating with the police on every opportunity. A couple in Calgary received 6 years manslaughter when their child was killed at their hands. 6 years. Jeez. So you get 8 years, potentially 8 years for mischief, but you're getting off with 6 years for manslaughter. And in some cases, murderers are getting that or less in this country. And this is where I say a narco-tyranny, because that describes a political system that persecutes its political rivals, that persecutes people who dare to question the political narrative of the government. They imprison them, they convict them, they arrest them. But it leaves the real criminals relatively alone. So this is why we have car thieves going to jail for maybe a week and getting out on bail and never being seen again. This is why we have people guilty of various forms of assault getting less than 2 years. And this is why we have killers going to jail for 6 years.
It's like a playbook right out of the United States justice system. We had thugs that beat up these, concert goers in Cincinnati, go into jail, get out on bond, $400, they're out. And then, other individuals spending years behind bars for incredibly small amounts, mischief or misdemeanors or other things like that. Well, we'll be watching it. So October, we have to wait until the sentencing. Is that right?
This is the astounding thing is that when I spoke to Tamara Leach when the sentencing hearing began, I said, when do you anticipate you're going to get the sentence? I mean, how long do you folks have to wait? And she thought, well, probably by mid-August. The judge determined at the end of the sentencing hearing that there would be a 2 month lag. We're going to have to wait literally until October 7th. But in August, they're getting together again. And the Crown is going to put forth arguments on why it should expropriate, or as I like to say, steal Chris Barber's truck. And what possible motivation could they have for that besides sheer vindictiveness and just sheer absolute larceny? It just amazes me how this clown show of a prosecution has even gotten this far with their arguments. There was never anything presented in the courtroom that suggested there was any violence or anything except peaceful protest being wrought by Chris Barber and Tamara Leach. And I have been there virtually for every court date, listening to the so-called evidence from the prosecution. And I have marveled that they were convicted at all. But I marveled that this even went to court, because this is clearly a show trial. This is a Stalinist show trial, and Tamara and Chris are clearly political prisoners. I've taken that line from day one with this trial. I've never treated this as a truly criminal trial. To me, it's a Bolshevik show trial by not only the Doug Ford government of Ontario, but by his good friend, first of all, Justin Trudeau, and now his very good buddy, Mark Carney. They're all in this together, Clayton.
David Creighton, you can read these pieces over at The Blaze. Thank you, as always, David, and follow David on X. He does great reporting up there in Ottawa. Thanks for keeping them honest, David. Great to see you.
Thank you so much, Clayton.
You bet. Thanks, David. All right, coming up on the show, we're going to talk about Hillary Clinton in moments and how the movement to get her arrested has grown. We saw the smoking gun, maybe the biggest bombshell of all today, drop by Senator Chuck Grassley's office. We're going to dive deep into all of that, and we have the receipts, and we're also going to talk about... Oops, sorry about that.
I'm muted. We're also going to talk about how can you prevent a child sex offender from surrogate and fathering a child via surrogate. Well, the state of Pennsylvania did not do that. A convicted sex offender was able to father a child via surrogacy. Now the state doesn't know what to do. This raises some really uncomfortable questions, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But first,
gold is surging. The dollar is dying. What are you guys doing about it? Are you just going to wait till it falls out? I mean, again, when the dollar is worthless or becomes even incredibly more worthless over the next couple of years and your buying power plummets, we all know that wars destroy lives, but it also destroys economies. That's why Natalie and I are big believers in investing in gold and silver. Gold is exploding. Central banks are buying record amounts of it. Goldman Sachs now says gold could hit $4,500 an ounce by 2026. Why? Because smart money is moving fast and quietly right now buying gold and silver. Natalie and I made the switch years ago. We own physical gold. We own physical silver. We don't own stocks in those things, which you can go on the stock market and you can buy like stocks in gold, which even the Sprott gold is doing really well. But to own actual physical items like real estate, gold and silver, that's where it's at. Even our kids have holdings right now in gold and silver. It's not a trend. It's insurance for the chaos that's coming in the future here. You've got one shot to protect your wealth before the next shock hits. I want you to call our friends at Lear Capital. That's where we get our gold and we get our silver. They're fantastic. They're an American company. They'll ship gold right to your house, silver right to your house. And I know there are people like in our chat room who'll be like, unless you have it in your house, you don't actually own it. That's not really true. I mean, yes, you can do whatever you want. You can put it in your gun safe. You can store it on your own, at your own home in your own safe. But not a lot of people have like big safes, and not a lot of people want to deal with that. So you can actually have it stored off-site in a 24-hour guarded facility. You can do that as well, and a lot of our viewers do that. Anyway, Lear can help you do either of those things. It's totally up to your personal preference. I had a friend who lived in Florida. His neighbor had a huge gun safe filled with gold and silver. That's how he lived. That's what he loved to do. He had his guns in there and his gold bars and his gold coins and his silver coins. And if he wanted to cash that out, he could take it to the gold broker, do all of that. Anyway, Lear will help you with all of that. Just call them and have a conversation with them so you can at least understand what this means for you and your family. 1-800-613-3557 is the phone number to get on the phone. Just give them a call. They're an American company, and they will talk to you and walk you through the process. Or just go to LearRedacted.com is the website. But ask them also, how can you get up to $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase? Like, what does that qualified purchase look like in order to start investing in precious metals? We highly recommend them. That's who we use. And they can also help you get that self-directed IRA set up. And they'll do that for free, by the way. They're a great company. So give them a call today, 1-800-613-3557, or go to LearRedacted.com. All right, let's talk about Hillary Clinton. arrest Hillary Clinton, this could actually be happening. A nuclear bomb just went off in Washington, D.C. this morning, 9 years really after the whole lock her up talk. Could this finally be happening? Recall CIA Director John Ratcliffe confirming that Hillary Clinton personally orchestrated and approved the Russia collusion hoax. Watch.
Think about the countless interviews that Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Jim Clapper, James Comey, John Brennan gave to the public, and testimony that they gave under oath about how Russia was involved in our election. And not one time, not a single time, did they ever reference what became verified intelligence, a Hillary Clinton plan. Verified, Maria, because in 2020, Hillary Clinton's own campaign manager took the oath under penalty of perjury in the trial of Michael Sussman and was asked about this plan and said, yes, there was a plan, and Hillary Clinton personally approved it.
Personally approved it. So that testimony saying that that happened was one thing. Well, we now have hard evidence from inside the United States Senate that Hillary Clinton herself helped manufacture the Trump collusion hoax and approved it. And we have the receipts for it as well. And now her lies are unraveling in really spectacular fashion. This isn't just another like political scandal. Not just throw it on the heap of political scandals. No, this is explosive. This is criminal level deceit that could lead her to her arrest and spend the rest of her life behind bars. Wouldn't that be amazing? Her criminality.
I never thought we would see such a smoking gun, but this is literally an email showing that she wanted to use the FBI and weaponize it against her political opponent. And the FBI went along with it under a hoax they thought up. It's outrageous to think that you are just able to do this. The rest of us would not be able to do this.
So Senator Chuck Grassley has just released a declassified annex, as it's called, from the Durham investigation, and it is a bombshell. This document contains verified emails that Natalie was just talking about, showing Hillary Clinton operatives at her request pushing intentional disinformation and lies to the FBI. They knew it was fake. Crafting a fake story about Russian hackers and Donald Trump just days before the 2016 election. And guess what? The FBI knew it was fake, but they ran with it anyway. Why? Because it was politically convenient. Also named in this report, if you read through it, I did, you get George Soros, the Open Society Foundation, George Soros named peppered all throughout it. You get DNC Chairman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, among others. Lots of names in here. How is this? This, I mean, basically is how a banana republic operates, folks. But no, it's the United States.
Well,
Here
imagine
is the email.
Hubris, though, also to think that I'm going to do this and the FBI, which should have its own intelligence and know better, will bend to my whim.
Can you imagine like sitting around an office and you're like, hey, I have an idea. We're going to cook up this fake story. We're going to push it out. Let's go to the FBI with a fake story. And you're going to help us push this out there. I mean, it is incredible hubris. I mean, it's like Mao level hubris.
I have the FBI at the touch of a button. They will create an investigation under something that I make up. I can't imagine living under that illusion of power, but she had it. She had the power. The FBI did follow suit.
Wu Jin says WikiLeaks already revealed this almost a decade ago. Well, yeah, big pieces of this, but not this particular piece of information. So let's look at this email that Grassley just released. July 27th, 2016. Leonardo Bernardo writes, quote, that HRC approved, meaning Hillary Rodham Clinton approved Julia's idea about Trump and Russian hackers hampering U.S. elections. That should distract people from her own missing emails. Can you imagine? Let me read that again. HRC approved Julia's idea. So yes, Hillary Clinton signed off on creating the entire Russian collusion hoax as a media distraction. The email goes on, even outlines exact talking points for the media to use, including blaming the GRU and Russian VPNs, all designed to distract her from her missing emails. Of course, the GRU is a Russian intelligence agency. They even name-dropped CrowdStrike and Threat Connect as tools to feed this garbage to the FBI and the media. We now know definitively that this wasn't an intel report. It was a PR campaign wrapped up in a false flag. I mean, look at the bottom of this email on your screen here. In absence of direct evidence, quote, CrowdStrike and Threat Connect will supply the media, and GRU will hopefully carry on to give more facts.
Facts should be in quotation mark. The part that really pisses me off as well is this: say something like a critical infrastructure threat for the election. So recall, we were not allowed to say things about critical infrastructure threats to the election in 2020. But in 2016, they used it as a hoax, and the media ran with it. Not just called it a hoax, but called it real for years.
When the Democratic National Committee claimed in 2016 that their servers were hacked by Russians, they never allowed the FBI at the time. Well, I'm sorry. Let me just go back a little bit here. Sorry. So as I was saying, in the absence of direct evidence, put that back up on the screen if we can. I mean, if we look at the bottom of this email, it says, quote, in the absence of direct evidence, CrowdStrike will supply the media. So what does that mean? Well, for context, when the Democratic National Committee claimed in 2016 that their servers were hacked by Russians, they never allowed the FBI or any government agency to inspect those servers, right? We all know that. Instead, the DNC hired CrowdStrike, a private cybersecurity company, to conduct the investigation. And then they released the bullshit facts that Russia had a hand in the hacking. The CEO of CrowdStrike later under oath testified that there were lies, that these were lies. There was never any evidence that Russia did anything. He was forced to under oath. So they all knew it was a lie.
I wonder how much Maddow got paid out of that. Because she was like the biggest proponent of it for, 3 years?
Oh, I mean, it unfolded like a documentary every night as someone who was glued to it and absolutely convinced that because Rachel Maddow was so convinced, it must be a thing and we're going to see this fall apart any minute now. She never looked behind the curtain even once. Even a small peek behind the curtain would have told you that the Steele dossier was a sham. So
and she never apologized for it either.
But that's
here's
the thing.
Yeah.
Real quick, she's probably behind the curtain too.
It's got to be.
Well, if it were media collusion, right? How much of as they point out in this email, and the media will basically carry the water for us. So we'll just get right on the phone. We'll push this out. Remember, Hillary Clinton went on Rachel Maddow's show, multiple times.
She did.
And you wonder how much collusion there was.
And the impetus that's being told to us here is because of the interest in the email scandal, the fact that she had her email on a private server, and that is against government protocol, and that just continued to gain steam. So they said, we are doing this in order to divert attention, which it absolutely did.
So they all knew this was a lie. But now take a look at this tweet that Hillary Clinton posted on October 31st, Halloween on 2016, just days before the election. She writes, computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump organization to a Russian-based bank. She knew it was a fake. This wasn't speculation. It was her own campaign's fabrication. And then, of course, at the bottom of this tweet, she attaches this long-winded statement from Jake Sullivan, which is now Biden's national security advisor at the time, claiming that this was the most direct link yet between Trump and Moscow. This is election interference at the highest level, and it came straight from Hillary Clinton's desk. But there's another big piece of this. That is the CIA and the FBI's collusion in all of this. We're talking Brennan, we're talking Clapper. So these two clowns just got together, Brennan and Clapper, I don't know, who's a famous duo?
Like Mutt and Jeff.
Abbott.
Oh my God, I'm trying to think of a comedy duo.
Abbott and
here.
Costello.
Abbott, that's who I was trying to think of. My brain is fried at the end of the week here. Brennan and Clapper, like Abbott and Costello, they get together and they just penned a piece in the New York Times and an opinion piece in the New York Times called Let's Set the Record Straight on Russia and 2016. So this just comes out over the past 24 hours. These two disgraced intelligence heads get together and trying to rewrite history, pretending that they didn't play a central role in weaponizing this entire hoax. They claim they were just reacting to intelligence at the time, only they were part of the intelligence laundering operation from the beginning, using friendly media like the New York Times and the Washington Post and Clinton allies to circulate these false stories.
No, they were actively ignoring intelligence that told them that this was a scam. So it doesn't hold any water because number one, they knew that it was coming. They had to know at the time that it was coming directly from HRC. And number two, if you look at the statement posted today by Tulsi Gabbard, DNI Gabbard, she points out how whistleblowers who were trying to warn that this intelligence was faulty were punished and threatened by the intelligence communities and their bosses where they worked. So no, they were active. They were not just, we just had to follow the trail. No, they were ignoring where the trail was leading, which would have shown that this was a hoax.
Yeah. Oh, people are saying Beavis and Butthead. That's a good one. Beavis and Butthead, Laurel and Hardy. That's another good one here. So I love that the New York Times allowed them to use their platform once again to write another story.
Doo-doo heads.
But also I love here, put this back up here because this is New York Times. I just want to show you guys, like, I don't pay, like I don't pay for the New York Times. And you can clearly see when I log in here, this is my own screenshot. They want to get us to pay for it. Literally, they want to monetize this story off of this whole catastrophe. So the New York Times is looking to make money for you to sign up just to pay for like $1 just to get access just to this one article.
To intelligence.
Yeah, to intelligence Beavis and Butthead guys. It's unbelievable, behind a paywall. So these are the same men who signed the phony Hunter Biden laptop letter in 2020.
Oh, good point.
Clapper and Brennan, calling it Russian disinformation. They lied then, they're lying now. This is about a deliberate attempt to manipulate a U.S. presidential election using fabricated intelligence, government resources, and media collusion in the New York Times, Washington Post, and elsewhere. And the woman at the center of it all, Hillary Clinton. She knowingly peddled disinformation to the FBI, to the media, to the American people, and we now have the documents to prove it in email form. We had the testimony, now we have the documents. Arrest Hillary Clinton isn't just a slogan anymore. By the way, it's the #1 trending topic today all over X, all over social media. Arrest Hillary. It's the only appropriate response to this level of corruption. Will the DOJ continue to look the other way? Will they actually go and make an arrest of her now, present this to a grand jury and indict her? Or will the American people finally demand full accountability for this decades-long lie, and say, we demand that these people finally be held to account? So many people in our chat are like, these people get away with it. They never get arrested. No one's ever walked away in handcuffs. Will Barack Obama, in his collusion with this, will Hillary Clinton finally be arrested?
Can I just play a little devil's advocate here, though?
Are you advocating for the devil, which is Hillary Clinton?
I just want to ask questions because I'm sure the FBI gets all kinds of crap tip-offs about people who just hate their neighbor and want their neighbor punished by the government. And those people, do they go to jail? Is it illegal to provide a fake tip to the FBI? I literally don't know if that's illegal. And when we talked to George Papadopoulos the other day, who was prosecuted by the Russiagate investigation, the Mueller investigation, he kind of shrugged off Hillary Clinton's role in this because he said, well, she was a candidate. She was just doing, all candidates lie. This was a political tactic, right? But she did, in fact, weaponize the justice system that took up American taxpayer dollars. So I'm just asking, I would like to know, what about this is actually illegal?
Okay, under 18 U.S. Code 1001, it is a federal crime to knowingly and willfully making any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statements or representation to the federal government, to the FBI, with an intent to mislead or obstruct. Making false statements,
and then
obstruction
here's
of justice,
another question.
False reports, up to at least 5 years in prison. If national security issues are involved or like national election related issues are involved. So she could maybe serve up to 5 years, I guess.
Okay. But what if she wasn't lying to the FBI? She was literally telling them, I want a fake investigation, and they gave it to her. Is there something illegal? Because it does not seem like anyone in the intelligence pushed back. They all said, Roger that, HRC, we will do it. So what if they just did a lie for her? I'm just saying, like, she seems really stinking slippery. And I want to know, what about this? Because are we all allowed to do it then? Should we all just call up things on the neighbors if they don't take their trash in time? Like, what here is the precedence that needs to be punished? I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But I want to know, what is the ironclad law that can actually be prosecuted?
I don't know. I mean, if there's like collusion with the FBI, I mean, that's like a whole other level of treason. I don't know. I mean, and again, James Brennan or Clapper and Brennan, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, like all of them are criminals in this, clearly.
But I keep coming back to the election interference. I mean, that's blatant election interference. Like, I don't know how that doesn't come up as a potential.
If Stormy Daniels is, that we were denied the right to know that Trump had sex with Stormy Daniels, that is what they called election interference, then that's possible. That's possible. Yeah, I think we'd need a lawyer to tell us, a constitutional lawyer to tell us what is the actual crime here, because... Well,
especially if Obama's involved and it rises to the level of treason, to conspiracy, then he's not protected. And that's where I think maybe the other shoe is about to drop in all of this. So anyway, arrest Hillary Clinton. We'll be watching it closely.
All right, we're going to end with this. It's not a great story, but we're going to get your feedback on it. So 2 gay men in Pennsylvania posted a video celebrating the birth of their surrogate baby, and it went viral when viewers discovered that one of the men is a registered child sex offender. This man in 2016, the one, I was going to say with the chubby cheeks, but they both have chubby cheeks. The one with the beard was arrested for trying to solicit sex from a 16-year-old boy, one of his own students at the high school where he taught chemistry. He sent the boy thousands of texts, solicited the boy to send him nude photos. He also wanted the victim to watch him pleasure himself, sent the victim 20 or more nude photographs of himself. This went on for over a year. Police also recovered hundreds of other sexually explicit videos on the laptop, and he pled guilty to felony child pornography possession and 1 count of corruption of a minor. He was sentenced to up to 23 months of incarceration, but court records show that he was granted parole. Part of his conditions included that he had no unsupervised contact with minors and that he surrender his teaching license. So I ask you, how did this guy get a baby? Well, it was through a surrogate, not an adoption agency. An adoption agency, you would hope, would have caught this. But surrogacy doesn't have the same safety checks in place. A surrogate is when you pay a woman to rent her womb. She will carry the child for you, and then you get full parental rights when the baby is born. Presumably, although we don't know which, one of the dads donated the sperm to create the baby, but it's not clear which. But it doesn't matter in the state of Pennsylvania, because once the woman hits her 3rd trimester, you register that child that's in the womb like you register a couch. That one's mine. And so those 2 men had full parental rights by the time that baby was in your utero 3rd trimester. But just like how any sex offender can father a child biologically and get someone pregnant, right? The same is true for surrogacy. How do you prevent that? Even if you don't go through the official surrogate channels, you could always just hire your friend and say, I want a baby. Let's do this. How do you stop this? And now that baby has this dad. Now, Pennsylvania Senator Doug Mastriano responded saying that the couple acquired the child through what appears to be a loophole in the legal system. He says here lawmakers are working to ensure that every authority is doing its part to protect the child and uncover exactly how this could happen. What he doesn't say here, and what I think he is conspicuously avoiding, is whether the child is still in the custody of the sex offender. It seems to me that the way he wrote it is that the child is, because they can't take it. Ugh. Can they? Is there any way they can take this child given that they have full parental rights? I don't know, and it's not clear, and they're not saying, and I think they're not saying on purpose. Now, the couple crowdfunded the surrogacy through GoFundMe without disclosing to donors that one of them was legally prohibited from unsupervised contact with minors. And so this case exposes a massive gap in surrogacy oversight. It's not, again, like adoption. So how do you prevent this any more than you can prevent a sex offender from fathering a child biologically? So a surrogacy advocacy group told Redux that this is not the first case of a sex offender procuring a child from a surrogate. And we don't, what can they do? Now, Senator Mastriano said we're going to do something and close up that loophole. But I ask you, how can they possibly do that? He says he's drafting legislation. So let us know what you think. How can this? It raises really uncomfortable questions about surrogacy and parental rights.
And also the guy's partner obviously knows what he did and decided to still have a child with him. So that means maybe he's the same way. Like, that's a scary, that poor child.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I want to know how many other states have this same kind of loophole then, because, I mean, Pennsylvania allows this gestational it's hard for me to say.
Surrogacy.
Gestational surrogacy contract and this pre-birth parentage order, and there's no law prohibiting that. So how many other states allow this, have this same kind of loophole?
Well, I guess you're pointing out a good point that, if you're a surrogate once, but this is tricky. So let's say, you and David are gay men and you have rented my womb, and then I'm in my 3rd trimester with a baby, and we go to the state and we say, we're going to register this baby as Clayton and David's baby. Maybe at that point, the state can run a background check. The problem is that what if it's, let's use fictitious because I don't want to call you guys perverts. Let's say it's, Draco Malfoy is the pervert.
Yeah, because this show's making me uncomfortable all of a sudden.
I know, right? And so
I love you, Clayton.
And he is the biological donor now. You can't say, oh, I'm sorry, this baby that's going to be born in the next few weeks, you actually can't have it. The child exists. Where does the child go now, right?
Yeah, it's crazy to think about.
But CPS exists, though. Like, CPS exists, though. So, like, if somebody gets married, like, if they have kids from a previous marriage and they get married and they marry a sex offender, I mean, cannot CPS come in and say, we're taking the children out of here?
Yeah,
Isn't that
point.
kind of one of the things they do?
Yeah, but who's going to call? Yeah, but it relies on.
Well, at least there'd be this process where you go to register the baby and they say, we need background checks before you take ownership of the baby that woman is carrying. Then that's possible. Sure. There we go. We just came up with one possibility. But again,
is background checks enough? I mean,
but then you have these babies. It's like they're in the assembly line already, and they don't go where they're intended. Does that put the onus on the surrogate mother? Like, oh, but actually, I don't want this child. It's just in me.
Because she was probably paid like $10,000.
Oh, it's way more than that now.
Is it?
That was like decades ago. It was 10.
Back when I was renting your room, it was like 10,000. Mm-hmm. Back when? No, I remember hearing those stories. Back then, it was like 10,000, right?
Long time ago.
Time ago?
I had a distant family member who did it for 10,000 30 years ago.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's where I heard the story.
Right.
Now it's what?
I would imagine it's upwards of 50.
Jeez.
But the couple crowdfunded for 50. They only made 2. What a dummy you were to have donated to those 2, right?
All right. So here are there's 16 jurisdictions that allow for this. California, Colorado,
of course,
Connecticut, Delaware,
all liberal states.
Idaho,
yeah,
Maine, very liberal. Maine, Massachusetts, liberal. Michigan, liberal. New Hampshire, liberal. New Jersey, Nevada, Vermont, Washington State, Washington D.C. Allow for this pre-birth parentage order.
Yeah. I guess. So other states are going to have to take a look at this. Now, there's a case right now in front of the courts in the UK where 2 convicted pedophiles or child sex offenders, they were some kind of like known perverts. That was a gay couple that adopted and sexually abused the baby so much that it died. And the autopsy is the stuff of nightmares. It died within 2 months at the age of 1 with all kinds of proof of penetration and other horrors, stuff of nightmares. So in the UK, there has been a lapse of, because there's this idea that all gay people must be wise and brave. And so, you don't stop them from whatever they want in a liberal democracy that we've been living in. And so how long until we have to see that happen before they're real? I mean, obviously, you don't care about children. You care about, the optics of being a progressive person if you are here in a society. So how then do we absolutely protect children first before people's sensibilities and identities? I'm asking.
It's a great question. So what I'll do is, why don't we hang out with people and talk with everyone about this as part of our Rumble Premium. Let me just pull up this document if I can find it. I don't know where it is. I'm just trying to dig for it here. But why don't you tell us about our...
Ever heard of search?
It's not that simple. Okay, I'm just going to find that. Why don't you tell people about our newsletter?
Okay, I will. The Redacted newsletter comes out Monday through Thursday. It is crafted by yours truly. I write it and make sure that it has links to original source material so that you can read up on things for yourself. It is meant as a companion to this show, although it has more sort of news tidbits as well as the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about in the Redacted show, and it's totally free. You can go to redacted.inc and you can sign up for free, absolutely free. There's nothing behind a paywall, no upsell, nothing. And again, it's at redacted.inc, and it's a great way for us to stay in touch with you, and you'll know when there are live shows and when they're not. And we're quite proud of it, so please be a Redacted newsletter subscriber. All right, so we're going to head on over to Rumble Premium right now. If you go to rumble.com/premium and use the code redacted to get 10% off. And again, you know that we really appreciate Rumble as a home of free speech and exclusive content to voices that matter. With Rumble Premium, you get ad-free viewing, access to exclusive shows, and premium features across the platform. And we're talking about Steven Crowder's Mug Club, Tim Pool's Timcast, Russell Brand's Raw Commentary, and of course, Redacted News. Whether it's breaking news, real talk, or content that challenges the narrative, Rumble Premium puts you in the front row. So support creators that actually say what they mean and mean what they say in a place where they still can. Go to rumble.com/premium/redacted to join today. One more time, that's rumble.com/premium/redacted. Use the code redacted to get $10 off, and we will see you there. Oh, look, that's me. Okay, so we will see you there. And we will say goodbye to you on YouTube. We would like you to join us. Please do. And if you don't, we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
All right, we are live on Rumble Premium. And always a reminder that, the show is all free except just this premium section. If you're a Rumble Premium